Good morning. Welcome to Sunday School, everyone. I have some honored guests in my chamber this morning, and my son and a couple of other unruly musicians have joined me for Sunday School. Welcome. Take your Bibles this morning and turn to the book of John chapter 3. This chapter contains likely the most well-known verse in the world. I don't know that there's one that I've heard quoted more often, and we're going to say something about it, but that's not what we're really going to focus on. But John chapter 3 verse 16 is, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have everlasting life." I guess that I memorized that when I was a kid in Sunday school, and I've heard it hundreds of times. You see it on billboards, you see it on sides of churches and reader boards, and people put it, you see it all the time. And matter of fact, so much so, and this is a common trait of humans, is that if you are exposed to something continuously, you take it for granted, or you kind of just hear it in a shadow kind of a way. It just you think you know it, but you don't really think about what it says. It becomes just words. And that's true of so many things about our lives. Water, air, sleep, all these things, they just become we take them for granted because they're so automatic. These three guys that are sitting here this morning in my class and myself are all sitting in a chair. And I promise you, none of the four of us studied the chair, looked at it carefully and said, "No, I think that'll hold me up." They just pulled it up and sat down. They probably don't clearly remember pulling it up. It's just something, and our life is full of these kind of things. And that's fine, except that I think it's important that we take the time, occasionally at least, to meditate about the things that are so common that we take them for granted. They came from somewhere. I had some ladies really laughing hard the other day. I was talking about being born, and I have the ability to be humorous from time to time. And I told her, I said, I was born over here in Marshall. And I said, I noticed when I first was born that there were several women around that were taking care of me, and I really liked it. It was really cool. And I think that's why I still like women so much. I said, my mom's a woman, my wife's a woman, and I kind of prefer the company of women. If you saw a group of guys hanging out over here, I like to hang out with the guys. It's fun. If I see a group of gals over here hanging out, I promise you, I'm going to pick that table almost every time. And my son's laughing because we've had this discussion before, and he agrees. I'm kind of just, and a lot of guys don't feel that way. I mean, they're attracted to them, but they don't want to go sit at the table with them. Well, I do. I love that atmosphere. So anyway, I had these ladies listening, and I said, now, turns out one of these ladies at the hospital was my mom. Turns out she's my mom. And so I went home with her. And I figured out pretty quick that if I wanted anything, all I had to do was just put up a little bit of a fuss. And man, she's right there. But that kind of wore thin. And I got to where every now and then I'd put up a fuss, and her reaction was to ignore me. And then it even got to the place where if I wasn't careful, my reaction, that type of reaction, would invite some actions that I didn't appreciate, like, some negative reactions. So anyway, I'm not telling it as funny as I did them because I had them laughing about it. But these are things that we take advantage of, we take for granted. All right, I'm going to read a verse apart from this chapter that we're looking at. And to get this all in 20 minutes, I have to stay on point, so quit getting me distracted. In Matthew chapter 7, verse 7 and 8, these verses have kind of become my favorite verses. Matthew chapter 7, verse 7 and 8 says, "Ask, and it shall be given you. Seek, and ye shall find. Knock, and it shall be opened unto you. For everyone that asketh receiveth, and he that seeketh findeth, and him that knocketh it shall be opened." Now, even as I read those verses, I remember how I used to feel when I read them, and I don't feel the same way that I do now, and I want to explain. For years, every time I read those verses, it made me think, it put me in mind that it was saying something like Santa Claus. Ask and you shall receive. Seek and you shall find. Knock and it's kind of, I don't know how to explain it better than that, except I kind of was thinking that what the Bible's saying here is if you want something, ask and it'll be given to you. That's not what it's saying here. And it's important to get that because it's not what it's saying at all. What he's actually saying is the reason you can't find God is you're not looking for him. You bump into him every time you move. Everything you do. You have breath that he gave you. You take a bath in water that he made. You breathe air that he created. All these things that you take dramatically for granted is because that's how far away it is. And so what he's saying is, I realize God knows that you have a hard time believing or grasping all this. I mean, he made you. He understands that. But he's giving you a hint here. Ask, and it shall be given to you. Seek, and ye shall find. You're not going to find something you're not looking for. Years ago, my dad got in the... my dad's a collector. He likes to collect things. And he got in the habit of looking for Volkswagens. And he pointed out something to me. He said, if you start looking for something, you'll find it. And it's been around you all along. And he proved it to me. And he got to where, and he got me to the place to where I could be driving down the road at highway speed and see 3 inches at the end of a Volkswagen bumper hidden behind a garage with grass growing around it. And I would say, that's a Volkswagen bumper. And all of a sudden, Volkswagens were everywhere. I saw them driving down the road. I saw them sitting in garages. I saw them grown with, they were everywhere. Take any issue, anything, start seeking it, and you'll start finding it. If it's there at all. And you can just name a subject. Some are probably even coming to you as I talk about that. The things that you decided to focus on, and all of a sudden, that's what your life starts filling up with. And God is saying, you're not finding me because you're not looking for me. You're ignoring me. That's the reason you're struggling with it. That's what this verse says. Now, we're going to go back, and he just says, if you seek, you will find. In John chapter 3, a man comes to Jesus. It's 108. I'm doing pretty good. There was a man of the Pharisees named Nicodemus. Most of you have heard this story before, and I'm just going to more or less tell it. And he was a ruler of the Jews. And the same came to Jesus by night and said to him, Rabbi, we know that thou art a teacher come from God, for no man can do these miracles that thou doest except God be with him. Now, I'm going to point a couple of things out about this. First of all, Nicodemus was a ruler of the Jews, and he came to Jesus by night. You have any maybe just first impressions of why he would have come at night? I don't think he wanted to be seen. I think it was kind of being, he didn't want to be embarrassed by the fact that he wanted to check in and have a one-on-one with this Jesus guy. And he came to Jesus and said, we know that you're a teacher come from God because we see these things you're doing. You're making people see, and you're raising people from the dead. Nobody else has ever done these things. And all of a sudden this guy shows up and you've got huge crowds following you, and you're just a carpenter's son. So what's going on here? You must be from God. And I love to read Jesus' reaction to things because it'll surprise you every time. And here's Jesus' reaction. You'll notice that it seems like a non sequitur here. Are you around people that use non sequiturs all the time? I know one, and one of Bo's favorite musicians is Walt, and he's definitely does it. People that do it catch your attention because they're thinking on a different level than you. So here's the non sequitur. He says, verily I say unto you, except a man be born again, he cannot see the kingdom of God. Now, Nicodemus says, we know that you're a teacher come from God, because no man can do these miracles that you do except God be with them. And Jesus' reaction was a non sequitur, it seems. Verily I say unto you, except a man be born again, he cannot see the kingdom of God. Would you expect that in reaction to what, if you said what Nicodemus said, is that what you would expect to hear? I mean, it's kind of like he's giving him an observation. We've seen this about you. And he just looks at him and says, you can't see the kingdom of God unless you're born again. What? And so he says, here's Nicodemus' reaction. How can a man be born when he is old? I'm reading this, by the way. Can he enter into his mother's womb a second time and be born? I think I see kind of a crack in, Jesus kind of a little smile when he says that. Verily, verily, I say unto thee, except a man be born of water and of the Spirit, he cannot enter the kingdom of God. Now, that verse has just blown me away for years. I thought, what is he saying? Okay, we're going to take just a few seconds here and talk about water. This is tough to get all this in. If you read the first 2 verses of Genesis, here they are. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. That's water. Then verse 2 says, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the water. That's verse 1 and 2 of Genesis chapter 1. And so it doesn't take God long to introduce the idea of water. And we could talk for hours about water, have a great, enjoyable conversation about water. I took the time to Google this, and I just typed in, what is the most important substance? Try it sometime. Water will pop up. If you Google what I just said, Google. What is the most important substance in the world, in the universe? It's water. Scientists, and we've explored, we can't find it anywhere. We can find a little evidence. There's a little ice they found, I think, on Mars or something, but on Earth, 2/3 of the planet is covered with it, and in some places it's 5 miles deep. It's a little bit of water here. Last night we had about 10 inches fall on this property. It's everywhere. We swim in it. We take baths in it. We drink it all the time. But what's everywhere here? Where'd it come from? Well, it just happened. No, nothing just happens. Nothing. I'm going to pick up any animal. You pick your own. It says, it screams, I came from somewhere. I'm made out of plastic with ink. And think of all the ingenuity there went in just to make this highlighter here. Everything says, I came from somewhere. And if you trace back each individual part, you'll come to a place to where eventually you'll find a dead end. And you'll find that it's transcendent. And the word transcendent means beyond your explanation. That's when you are getting real. And that's when you're really thinking. When you get to the place where you say, where did it come from? Where did you come from? Where did water come from? It has a source. It did not just happen. It came from somewhere. I heard a guy who was listening to Stephen Hawking as a little kid. He was listening to Stephen Hawking, and he asked him all these questions, and he got back to where he was just asking him things that nobody can know. And Hawking was trying to give him the best answers he could. Him being an atheist, he was explaining everything materialistically. But you could tell. Everybody was laughing because he was just guessing. He was just saying, these are my best ideas. And then he finally said, we're getting to the place where we think that things are so well organized and so meticulous that aliens must have done it. And the little kid just said, where'd the aliens come from? Duh, that is the question. You got it. No matter how far back you go, sooner or later you're going to get to that. Where did that come from? Nothing just happened. It didn't just poof. It is the experience of life, folks. Try it. These guys are musicians, and I do oil and gas, and whatever you do, it doesn't matter. Whatever you do, think about how incredulous you would be if someone suggested that you just accidentally got where you could do that. No, you busted your tail to get where you could do it. You worked at it. Nothing just happens. So, he says, you got to be born of water and of the Spirit. So I hope I've gotten you to see what I'm talking about. Water is the mother of everything, is basically what Jesus is saying. Is the physical side of things. You got to be born. You were born of water. That's where you came from. But he said you also have to be born of the Spirit. That which is born of the flesh is flesh, and that which is born of the Spirit is spirit. There's two births. There's one where you're born physically and one where you're born spiritually. And you are born physically without your knowledge. You just wake up one day and you're there, and you're made aware that you were born. But the spiritual birth is something you choose. You get to the place where you say, I want to be aware of things that I can't really. So let's talk about spiritual things for a second here. Things that we all think about that are spiritual, so to speak, kind of in the spirit realm. Here, I'm just going to make a list of them. First of all, consciousness. You ever think about your consciousness? Where did your consciousness come from? You're aware of things. You're able to speak and talk and hear and understand, and you're aware that you're here. Your awareness of the universe. Where did that come from? It's nothing you can put your finger on. It's not just automatically part of being alive. There's a lot of things that are alive that don't have consciousness. They're just there, including people that are in a coma or something, or even people when they're asleep. You have subconsciousness, but consciousness is something you can't really. You wake up in the morning and you're conscious. Where'd that come from? You have dreams. And dreams, you personally may not remember this happening to you. Maybe you have. It happened to me. I've had it happen. A lot of other people have told me about this. I have dreamed things before that when I woke up and thought about it, I was blown away by it, because I can't even think. I've never had those thoughts before. It's like they just popped in my head from nowhere, and they were things that I would have not ever thought of if I had been broadly conscious. It was like, I hesitate to use the word magic, but that's the way it felt. I thought, where did that come from? That's crazy. These are things we can't explain. There's a few more on the list. Energy. We take this on this list of things we take for granted. Energy. People say, well, I just don't have the energy today. Well, where do you get energy? Well, you get it from food, and you start losing the ability to explain, because you don't know what energy is. Well, here, you're not alone. Take any scientist you happen to know and ask him to explain energy for you, and he'll get tongue-tied just like you did. There's no explanation. It's just this invisible thing that's out there. Say, well, it's electricity. Yeah, we've learned how to make this rub against that and make this thing called energy, but we still don't know why it's there or where it came from, and we've managed to make lights and all these things, but we can't explain it. No one can explain it. Gravity. We take it for granted. You weigh a certain amount. All these big planets have more pull than little planets. But what is it? It's this invisible force out there. You ever had magnets that you play with? Take one, and you can stare between there, and you hold it out there, and it's there. You know it's there, but you can't see it. Explain it for me. No one can. No one has ever been able to. There's been tons of scientific papers written about it. These are spiritual type things. Intuition. Truth. You say, what is truth? Well, in its basic form, truth is saying exactly what actually is. There's a line in Liar, Liar, the movie, where he takes a pen and he said, I'm going to lie. He said, this pen is, he wants to say it's red, and he says, the ink in this pen is, and he cannot lie. Well, the truth is spiritual. It's hard to get your mind around what really the truth is, because what do you know? How do you know what the truth is? I don't mean just truth like this pen is blue. I mean the truths, the great truths of the universe. How do you know what's true and what's not? You have to seek it and that's what that verse I read first means. You'll find it if you seek it. You're not going to just have it just dumped out on you in a bucket. You have to look for it. 1:20, I'm out of time. Let's see, how can I wrap this up quickly here? All right, verse 8. Verse 7, he says, marvel not that I say unto you, you must be born again. He said, you're a spiritual leader and you know this. And here's the last verse I'm going to read. He said, the wind bloweth where it listeth, and thou hearest the sound thereof, and thou canst not tell from whence it cometh or whither it goeth. So is everyone that is born of the Spirit. And Nicodemus said, how can these things be? And he said, you're a master of Israel and you don't know this? He said, I'm telling you things that I witnessed with my own eyes because I came from heaven. And you're not listening to me and you don't believe me. How are you going to believe? I'm talking about earthly things now. How are you going to believe I tell you heavenly things? Okay, here's the way I'm going to wrap this up. You hear all the time about gods and all these various gods. And it's easy if you're not careful just to, especially if you're not very religious, to just group gods in all these groups. And you will until you take time to look into it carefully. And when you do, you're going to realize there's not a bunch of gods. It's not even close. There's really just one. There's just one serious God. And you won't realize that until you seek. And when you seek it, you'll realize. And it'll be pretty clear to you that this is different. This is not just religious. This is the one that made everything. It's good stuff. All right. Thank you guys for joining me today. It's good to see you folks. Have a good time this week, and I'll see you next week.